A crumpled napkin. A poem with no name. When Keanu Reeves finds it in his pocket after a rainy night at a quiet diner, he has no idea it holds the key to a family's lost past. But who wrote the words, "I don't remember your name, but I remember your eyes"? And what secret have they unknowingly carried for decades? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain had been steady for over an hour, drumming against the windshield like a slow, stubborn heartbeat. Keanu drove through the winding back roads of rural Oregon, past fields soaked in silver and forests blackened by cloud. He wasn't headed anywhere in particular. Sometimes he liked it that way. Just after 9, he saw the flicker of neon cutting through the mist. Edna's Diner, open late. The sign buzzed faintly above a peeling red awning. The building looked like it hadn't changed in decades. He parked beside a rusty pickup and stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, then the silence. A single booth was occupied by an old man with a newspaper folded in half. A cook stood behind the pass-through, arms crossed, staring at the muted TV above the fridge. The only sound came from the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft clinking of cutlery from the far end of the counter. She stood behind the register. Young, maybe mid-20s, a loose braid over one shoulder and a navy apron dusted in flour. She looked up when the bell rang, gave a polite smile, and grabbed a menu. "Sit anywhere you'd like," she said. Keanu nodded and took a booth near the window. The glass was fogged from the rain, streaked by time. She approached with coffee before he could ask. "You look like you've been driving for hours," she said, her voice gentle. "I have," he replied. She smiled, then added, "Menu's a little dated, but the grilled cheese is still loyal." He nodded again. "That sounds perfect." She didn't ask his name. He didn't ask hers. When she returned with the food, he noticed the notebook tucked under her arm. She placed the plate gently on the table, then tucked the notebook onto the counter as she walked away. Between orders, she'd lean on her elbow and write in it, pages flipping, pen moving steadily. She barely looked up. Keanu ate slowly. The grilled cheese was crisp, buttery, familiar. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. It pooled in the lot and dripped from the awning like the sky was remembering something sad. When he finished, he walked up to the counter. She rang him up. He paid in cash. As he turned to go, he gave her a soft, "Thank you." She smiled again. "Safe travels." He stepped back out into the storm, coat collar turned high. He didn't notice the napkin until much later. The motel was nothing special. A single-story row of beige rooms with flickering porch lights and numbered keys on metal rings. Keanu checked in with little more than a nod and the faint scent of wet pavement trailing behind him. Inside, he kicked off his boots and hung his coat on the wall hook. That's when he felt something in the pocket. He reached in and pulled out a napkin. At first, he thought it might be from dinner, but there was no grease, no fold marks. Instead, delicate blue ink moved across it in small, careful letters. He sat down on the edge of the bed and smoothed it out. It wasn't a note. It was a poem. "I don't remember your name, but I remember your eyes. They watched me through windows. I was too small to open. And even now, I feel them when I close mine." The handwriting was elegant, almost shy. Not rushed, but not polished either. Each word had been written with purpose, like someone was trying to remember something important and couldn't quite reach it. Keanu read it twice, then a third time. He wasn't sure how it had ended up in his pocket. Maybe she'd slipped it in with the bill. Maybe it had stuck to his sleeve at the counter. But something about it felt left behind, like it wasn't just for anyone. He turned it over. Nothing else, just the poem. He stood and walked to the window. The rain had slowed to a whisper now. The diner's sign was no longer visible, but the feeling hadn't left him. Something about the words wouldn't let go. Who writes something like that and leaves it behind? And more importantly, Who were they writing it to? He folded the napkin gently and placed it on the nightstand, next to his journal. Then he sat in the chair by the window and stared out at the dark. The sky was still crying, but quieter now, as if something had finally been spoken. The next morning, the sky had cleared, but the air still held the damp hush of a storm recently passed. Keanu woke early, brewed weak motel coffee, and sat at the small writing desk with the napkin unfolded beside his notebook. He stared at it for a while before writing a single line beneath it. Who are you remembering? The poem lingered in his thoughts like a song he couldn't place. It wasn't just the words, it was the ache beneath them. Something about it felt unfinished, unanswered. He didn't have a plan, but he folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into the front of his journal. Then he packed up, checked out of the motel, and headed back down Highway 6. When he pulled into the diner's parking lot, it was just after 10. The lot was mostly empty except for a minivan and the same old pickup from the night before. Inside, the place looked the same. Vinyl booths, faded ketchup bottles. The morning shift cook stood behind the pass-through with a spatula in hand, watching a soap opera rerun on the tiny TV. The girl from last night was wiping down the counter. She looked up when the bell chimed. Their eyes met for a beat. "You came back," she said, a little surprised. Keanu nodded. "Left something behind?" She smiled, a little unsure. "Your receipt?" He shook his head. "Not exactly." He pulled the napkin from his coat pocket and held it gently between two fingers, like it was something sacred. "I found this in my coat last night." Her face changed. Not dramatically, just a flicker, a small pull at the corners of her mouth, the way someone might react if they'd heard a song they hadn't played in years. She reached out slowly and took it from him, eyes scanning the lines. Then she whispered almost to herself, "I didn't think anyone ever read those." He sat down at the counter. "I did." She didn't respond right away, just folded the napkin again and tucked it into her apron pocket. "I write them," she said finally, "for someone I might have known. A long time ago." Keanu tilted his head. "Might have?" She hesitated, then said softly, "I think I had a sister once, but I don't have proof, just dreams, just this feeling." He said nothing, but his eyes stayed with her, and something about the silence between them felt less empty. The coffee pot hissed in the background. Somewhere outside, a bird began to sing. Inside the diner, a forgotten poem had started to become a beginning. Lena poured his coffee without asking. Same booth. Same quiet hum of morning chatter. This time the diner had a few more customers, a young couple with a baby, 2 truckers by the window, and an older woman sitting alone in the far corner, stirring her tea with slow, steady hands. Keanu looked up as Lena set the mug down. "You remembered how I take it," he said. She gave a small smile. Not many people ask for it black these days. He nodded toward her apron pocket. "Do you always write them on napkins?" She blinked, surprised, then flushed slightly. "Not always. Sometimes receipts, sometimes the backs of shift schedules, whatever's around." She moved to wipe down the counter, but Keanu's presence had shifted something. She came back and leaned slightly against the booth. "You read it?" she asked. "I did." Her fingers tapped softly against her notepad. "I don't know why I write them. I've been doing it since I was a kid. Little poems, letters, messages to someone I don't know how to find." Keanu stayed quiet. Lena hesitated, then said softly, "I think I had a sister." She glanced down. "But there's no proof. I've never seen a photo, no records, nothing." He watched her carefully. "Then how do you know?" She looked up. "Because sometimes I wake up crying, and I can't remember why. And other times, I'll be looking in the mirror and get this weird feeling. Like, I'm not supposed to be the only one." Keanu nodded slowly, letting her words settle in the space between them. He wasn't there to question her. He was there to listen. Lena glanced around the diner, making sure no one was within earshot, then leaned in slightly. When I was 10, I told my caseworker that I thought I had a twin. She laughed. Said maybe I just wanted one. Keanu's brow lifted slightly. Did you? Of course I did, Lena whispered. Every kid in the system wants someone who looks at them and sees the same scar, the same face, the same missing pieces. She looked away, her voice softer now. But this didn't feel like pretending. It felt like remembering. Keanu didn't speak. He watched her carefully, respectfully, and let the silence stretch. Lena exhaled, rubbing her palms along the edge of her notepad. I've never told anyone that. He nodded. Sometimes you just need one person to believe you. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled sadly. And sometimes you just write it down and pretend someone's reading. At the corner booth, the elderly woman stirred her tea again. Her gaze lingered on Lena. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for a napkin of her own, but she didn't write anything. She just watched, eyes wet with something she hadn't yet named. Lena didn't notice. She was still speaking, almost to herself now. I keep writing these little things, she said, not just poems, notes, questions. Sometimes I fold them up and leave them in library books. Sometimes I drop them on park benches, just in case someone recognizes the words. Keanu tilted his head. And has anyone ever written back? No, she said. Then, after a pause, but I always wondered if someone was reading them, even if they didn't know it yet. Lena reached under the counter and pulled out a small spiral notebook. The edges were frayed, corners bent from years of folding and unfolding. This one I keep for myself, she said. Started it when I was 13. First foster home where I stayed more than a few months. She flipped it open to a random page and held it up. It was a sketch. 2 girls side by side, identical. One had long curls, the other a short ponytail. Their hands were clasped. I drew them before I understood why, Lena murmured. I gave them names. One was me. The other, I just called her the other half. She closed the book gently. I used to imagine we ended up in the same town, same school, that maybe she was out there wondering the same thing. Keanu leaned forward slightly. And if she is? Lena looked at him, her voice quieter than ever. Then, I hope she's okay. Even if I never meet her. I hope she made it. In the corner, the elderly woman slowly stood. She walked to the register, sliding a few bills onto the counter. But instead of leaving, she lingered near the front door, eyes still on Lena. She cleared her throat. I remember you. Lena turned, startled. I'm sorry. The woman stepped closer. I used to run this place. Back when your caseworker would drop you off here while she did interviews at the courthouse across the street. Lena blinked. I thought I imagined that. The woman smiled. You always had a notebook, and you always sat in the same booth, scribbling, talking to someone who wasn't there. Lena's voice trembled. I didn't think anyone noticed. I noticed, the woman said. And I remember something else. She paused, then added, there was another girl. Not at the same time. Years earlier, she sat in that same booth, left something behind. Lena's breath caught. What was it? The woman looked toward Keanu, then back to Lena. If you're serious about finding out, I think it's time I showed you. The diner had emptied out by the time Lena's shift ended. The cook had gone home, and the neon sign had been shut off. Rain tapped softly at the windows again, a light mist returning like a memory retracing its steps. Lena wiped down the last counter, untied her apron, and walked into the back. Doris stood near the register, watching her go. She's good at what she does, Doris said gently. Keanu nodded. She's holding a lot for someone that young. They both sat in the booth by the window, the same one Lena had claimed each time. Doris exhaled slowly and folded her hands on the table. I wasn't sure I'd ever talk about this again, she said. But when she said she thought she had a sister, it shook something loose in me. Keanu leaned forward, attentive. It must have been 25, maybe even 30 years ago, Doris began. A young woman came in here late one afternoon, soaked through from the rain. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She carried a photo in her hand, kept glancing at it like it hurt just to hold. Doris paused and looked out the window, like she could still see the girl out there. Memes didn't order anything, just sat in that booth. Cried for a while, then she started writing. It was fast, like she didn't have much time. What was she writing? Keanu asked. A letter, Doris said. Folded it carefully, placed it under the sugar jar, and walked out without saying a word. Keanu waited, sensing there was more. I didn't read it right away. I thought maybe she'd come back for it. She never did. So you kept it? Doris nodded. For a while I stored it under the register. Then, when we renovated years later, I took it home. Put it in an old cookie tin with other things I didn't know what to do with. She looked at him now. I don't know if it means anything, but that girl, she reminded me of Lena. Not in her face, necessarily, but in how alone she looked. Like she was trying to let go of something she hadn't even had the chance to hold. Keanu sat quietly with her words. The booth felt heavier now. I can take you to it, Doris said, if you're willing to climb a few attic steps. He gave a small nod. Lead the way. The drive to Doris's house took less than 10 minutes. It was a modest one-story cottage tucked between two fir trees with an overgrown fence and wind chimes that whispered in the breeze. The porch creaked underfoot, but the house held the kind of warmth that only came from years of lived-in silence. Doris unlocked the door and led Keanu inside. The living room was filled with old books, a faded recliner, and a lamp with a frayed shade. She motioned toward the hallway. "Let me go up the stairs." He followed her through a narrow corridor until they reached a pull-down ladder. Doris moved slowly but insisted on going up first. "I remember exactly where I put it," she called down. Keanu waited, listening to the shifting of boxes and the soft thud of careful searching. A few minutes passed. Then a faint sound. Metal, scraping against wood. "I've got it," she said. She descended slowly, holding a round tin covered in faded flowers. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried it to the dining room table and opened it. Inside were various pieces of time, old receipts, newspaper clippings, a baby shoe, a rusted house key, and finally, an envelope. It was thick, yellowed at the edges, and sealed with tape. On the front, in delicate handwriting, were 6 words. "To the one I lost." Doris placed it gently in front of Keanu, her voice soft. "I never had the heart to throw it away. Always thought maybe someone would come looking." Keanu stared at the envelope. It didn't just feel old, it felt sacred, as if whatever was inside had been waiting. Not just to be read, but to be heard. "May I?" he asked. Doris nodded. He peeled the tape slowly, carefully. The paper inside unfolded in 3 neat creases. The ink had faded in places, but the handwriting remained graceful, purposeful. He began to read. "To the one I lost. If you are reading this, it means the world allowed us one more chance to connect, however small. I don't know your name, I don't even know where you were taken, but I have whispered your name into the quiet for years, even if no one else knew you existed. You were born just before dawn. You cried first. Your sister followed. I was young, terrified, and alone. The hospital said I could only take one home, that the paperwork was already filed, that the state had decided. I begged, I screamed, but they told me it was better this way, that separating you would give you both a better shot. They were wrong. I was given a name for one family, no name for the other. I don't even know which of you I held, but I have carried this ache every day since. I see you in dreams. I see 2 girls on a swing, one always fading. I write to you even when no one sees the pages. I hope somehow you've found joy, even if it wasn't with me. If you felt someone missing, I want you to know you weren't crazy. You were right. You weren't alone. You never were. With all the love I wasn't allowed to give you, your mother. Keanu sat in silence, the letter spread before him. The air in the room felt still, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Doris pressed her lips together and wiped the corner of her eye. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, she whispered. Something about it. It felt too heavy to forget. Keanu folded the letter gently and returned it to its envelope. This, he said quietly, belongs to her. Doris nodded. I thought it might. I just didn't know who she was until today. He stood slowly, looking around the room. The faded curtains, the ticking wall clock, the photo frames coated in dust. Every corner held a trace of someone waiting. For closure, for peace, for someone to finally ask the right question. As he stepped toward the door, Doris called out gently, Do you think she'll understand? Keanu turned back, eyes kind. She already does, he said. She's just been waiting to hear it from someone else. Keanu didn't drive home right away. Instead, he pulled into a quiet rest stop near the river, engine ticking as it cooled in the night air. The envelope from Doris lay on the passenger seat. The letter inside felt heavier than paper, heavier than ink. It was the kind of truth that didn't just reveal, it rearranged. He opened his journal, flipped past pages of half-finished notes and quotes, and wrote one line in the center of the next blank page. Have you ever felt like someone was missing from your life, even if you couldn't explain why? He stared at the sentence for a long time, then typed it into a quiet online forum, one he used occasionally, anonymously. It wasn't flashy, just a place where people wrote without filters, without followers, without performance. A space for truth, however small. He hit submit. Then, he waited. It didn't take long. The first reply came within minutes. Yes, since I was a child. I used to dream about someone standing at the end of my bed. Not scary, just familiar. She never spoke, but I woke up missing her every time. Another followed. There's a photo of me at age 5, and I swear there used to be someone next to me, like the picture was cropped. My mom says no, but I remember her, and more. Sometimes I wake up crying, but I don't know who I'm crying for. I used to talk to someone in my dreams. I think it was my sister, but when I asked my parents, they said I was imagining things. When I was 9, I wrote letters to someone named Alex. I don't know why. I just felt like they were out there, waiting for a letter back. Keanu scrolled slowly, reading each one with care. The ache was universal. Not always loud, but always real. Loneliness with no explanation. Longing with no shape. He bookmarked a few of them. Some were short, some went on for pages. A few he reread twice. Then a new comment appeared. The comment was short, only one line, but it stopped Keanu cold. Her name might have been Isabel. He read it again. There was no profile photo, no username that meant anything, just a line, but something about the handwriting of the words, digitally typed, but emotionally raw, felt familiar. He had no doubt it was from Lena. There was a rhythm to it, the kind of quiet ache that matched the napkin, matched the drawing in her notebook, matched the way she stared at the space beside her, like someone was always supposed to be sitting there. He leaned back in the seat and let the message settle in. She didn't say I had a sister. She didn't say I'm looking. She just wrote what she remembered, or dreamed she remembered. Isabel. The name in the letter, the name their mother never got to say out loud again, was more than a guess. It was a thread stretching across years, tugging at the same ache from two directions. He refreshed the page. More responses had come in. I used to hum a song I'd never heard. Then my cousin told me her late sister used to sing it. I can't explain it, but I feel like someone follows me in the best way, like a shadow that watches over me, waiting for me to notice. When my daughter was little, she used to say she missed her brother, but she was an only child. We thought it was just play. Now I'm not so sure. Each story added to the invisible choir, people whispering across time, trying to name the unnamed. But Lena's message was the one that lingered. Keanu typed a quiet response, not directly to her, but close enough that she might see it. Sometimes remembering doesn't come in a straight line. Sometimes it's just a name, and that's enough to begin. He hit send, then closed the screen. The river outside moved slowly, reflecting the night sky. A single heron stood still in the shallows, watching the world without rushing it. Keanu leaned forward and rested his hand on the envelope still sitting beside him. There was work to do, and someone else to find. Lena sat in her small apartment, the same notebook open on her lap. The diner had closed hours ago, but she couldn't sleep. Not after what Doris had said. Not after the way Keanu had looked at that letter, like it meant more than just words on old paper. She had read the forum post earlier that night. She didn't know why she clicked on it. Maybe the question had stirred something deep, too deep to ignore. Have you ever felt like someone was missing from your life, even if you couldn't explain why? It felt like it had been written for her, or by her. She hadn't planned to respond, but her fingers moved before she could stop them. Her name might have been Isabel. It wasn't a fact, but it was more than a guess. It was something her heart whispered when logic fell away. Something she'd written in poems for years, never knowing why. Now, reading it back on the screen, it felt like something had cracked open. She scrolled through the other replies. Some made her cry. Others made her feel less alone. Then one stood out. Sometimes remembering doesn't come in a straight line. Sometimes it's just a name. And that's enough to begin. Her chest tightened. She didn't know who had written it, but something in her knew they understood. She placed the notebook beside her and looked across the room at a dusty shoebox on the shelf. Inside were scraps, napkins, notes, torn journal pages she'd never been brave enough to share. She walked over, opened the box, and reached for the oldest piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing, two girls standing in front of a house, holding hands. One had long curls. The other had a ribbon in her hair. On the back, in shaky 8-year-old handwriting, it read, "Me and her. One day I'll find her." Lena closed her eyes and whispered the name again. Isabel. She didn't know what came next. She only knew it had started. Across town, Keanu sat in his car, watching the lights flicker off one by one in the houses along the street. The town was quiet again. But in the silence, something had shifted. A thread had been pulled. A name had been spoken. And somewhere, someone else might be whispering it too. The sun hadn't fully risen when Keanu returned to the diner parking lot. He sat quietly in his car, the letter unopened in his hand, watching the early light stretch across the wet pavement like gold over glass. The envelope still bore those words, "To the one I lost." He hadn't opened it last night. Somehow it hadn't felt right, not without her. This morning he waited for Lena before the diner even unlocked. She arrived at 6:45 sharp, same as always, a thermos of coffee in one hand and her notebook in the other. When she saw Keanu standing beside his car, she froze. "You're early," she said, a little breathless. He held up the envelope. "I think this belongs to you." She looked down at it, but didn't move. "It's from someone who came into the diner years ago," he explained gently. "Doris kept it. She said the woman left it behind." Lena took a slow step forward. "You read it?" "No," Keanu said. "Not yet. I wanted to read it with you." She hesitated, then nodded. They walked across the lot, past the booths inside, and into the break room, where she usually took her 5-minute rests. They sat across from each other at the small table. Keanu set the envelope down between them. Lena stared at it like it might vanish if she blinked. Then, with trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Inside was a folded page, aged and creased. The handwriting was elegant, but rushed, like a heart spilling faster than the hand could keep up. She read aloud, her voice small at first, then steadier. To the one I lost. I don't know what else to call you, because I was never given the right to name you. I held you for 27 minutes. Your skin was warm, your eyes were barely open, and your hand wrapped around my finger like it knew me. And maybe it did. You had a sister. You came into this world together. 2 cries, side by side. 1 heartbeat became 2. You were both mine. Lena's voice trembled. She blinked hard and kept reading. But they said I could only keep 1. Said there was no record of the other application being approved. That it was too late. That the system had already split the files. One of you was taken by a family in the city, given a new name, a new home, a fresh start. The other was placed into foster care. I was told not to fight it, that trying would only make things harder for everyone. But how can a mother not fight? I screamed, I begged, but no one listened. Lena's hands shook. Keanu reached forward and gently steadied the paper. She nodded her thanks, took a breath, and kept going. I wasn't strong enough to stop them. I wasn't brave enough to stay. But I never forgot. I carried both of you in my heart, even though I only ever held one of you in my arms. I gave her the name I chose for both of you. Clara Isabel Morales. I don't know which one of you kept it. Lena's lips parted, her breath caught. Keanu's voice was soft now. Your name? She nodded, stunned. I always wondered, she whispered. I always felt like it wasn't just mine. She looked down at the letter again, eyes welling. You were born together. You were not meant to live apart. If you ever find this, please know that I never chose to lose you. I only ever chose to love you. Forever. Your mother. Lena sat still, the letter resting flat on the table. She didn't speak for a long moment. Keanu gave her the space. Finally, she whispered, So, I was right. He didn't respond. She lifted her eyes, wide and wet and full of something ancient. I wasn't alone. Lena folded the letter gently, like it might tear from the weight of her hands. Her fingers paused over the name, Clara Isabel Morales. She whispered it aloud, letting it live in the air for a moment. Then she looked at Keanu. I don't know which one I was, she said, Clara or Isabel. Keanu gave a small shake of his head. I think, maybe. You're both. She blinked. You carried the name, he continued, and the longing. Maybe that's why the poems came. Maybe you were writing from both sides of yourself. Lena exhaled, then gave a soft, shaken laugh. I always thought I was missing something. Now it turns out I was missing someone. The silence between them settled like soft snowfall. She reached for her notebook and opened to a blank page. For the first time, she didn't write a poem. She just wrote the name. Isabel. She underlined it once. I want to find her, she said. I don't know where to start, but I need to know if she's okay. Keanu nodded. We'll find her. The word we wasn't lost on her. She looked up. Why are you helping me? He didn't answer right away, just tapped the envelope gently and said, Because someone kept this safe for a reason. She looked down at the folded paper again. The creases were old, but the words still breathed. She must have loved us, Lena said. Even if she couldn't stay. She did, Keanu said. She still does. A few minutes passed. Lena stared out the break room window, the sky now streaked with soft light. The day was beginning, but everything had changed. There was a name now, fitness of haircutting, in a thread that finally had another end. "I used to imagine her face," Lena whispered. "In dreams. At bus stops and crowds. I thought I was crazy." Keanu smiled gently. "You were remembering." Lena nodded. Her hands rested on the notebook now. "Steady. I'm not afraid anymore," she said. He stood, offering her the envelope. "Keep it with you." She took it, holding it close, like something sacred had finally come home. And outside, the first rays of morning slipped across the diner windows, painting the glass with gold. Keanu didn't rush. After leaving Lena with the letter and the photograph, he gave her time. He'd learned the difference between a door that's open and one that's ready to be walked through. But while Lena processed her truth, Keanu quietly took the next step. He returned to his hotel room and opened his laptop. The quiet hum of the heater filled the space as he typed, "Isabel Morales birth records. Oregon." Then, "Clara Isabel Morales twin separation." Nothing surfaced directly. Most of the digital records from the early 1990s were scattered or incomplete, so he switched tactics. He searched for teachers. Music teachers, specifically. He typed the name Isabel and narrowed the area to within 100 miles of Lena's diner. That's when it came up. Isabel Grace? Music educator, Portland. Her profile was part of a community music outreach website. She'd organized a free recital for underserved kids the year prior. The program name made Keanu pause. Echoes of Home. He clicked through to her biography. It was short. Adopted young. Found music early. Still searching for the perfect note. He reread that last line. His fingers hovered over the trackpad, then moved to a staff directory on her school's website. There was a school email, a faculty ID, an address, and a photo. She was older now, early 30s, clear eyes, a posture that was both confident and gentle, a soft strength, like someone who had built her life on patience. Keanu stared for a long moment. She didn't know someone out there had been writing poems to her face, didn't know there was a woman named Lena who'd been saving a space in her heart since childhood. The next morning, Keanu drove 2 hours north to Portland. He didn't call, he didn't email. He simply arrived at the school's front office, registered as a guest of the music program, and asked if he could observe a session. The principal, a kind woman named Ms. Vela, welcomed him with a raised brow and a chuckle. "We don't get Hollywood types in our halls very often. You sure you're just observing?" Keanu smiled. "Just watching, nothing more." She led him down a long, mural-covered hallway toward the music room at the end. Laughter and rhythm filtered through the door. "You're in for a treat," Ms. Vela said. "Miss Grace is the heart of this school." When they stepped inside, Keanu saw her. Isabel Grace stood at the front of a small group of fourth graders. She was conducting them through a clapping rhythm, switching between half notes and rests. Her voice was calm, firm, and warm. She didn't speak down to the children. She spoke with them, guiding, encouraging, adjusting. When one boy missed a beat, Isabel smiled and said, "That's not a mistake. It's a new rhythm. Let's find it together." Keanu watched from the back of the room, arms folded, expression quiet. He wasn't there to impress, he was there to listen. And everything she did confirmed what he already suspected. There was music in her bones, but there was also something missing in her gaze. Not pain, exactly, but a pause, a space between sentences where something unsaid always lived. After the final bell rang and the students poured out in their coats and backpacks, Isabel began stacking sheet music. Keanu stepped forward slowly. She turned and gave him a polite smile. "You made it through hand percussion. That's impressive." He returned the smile. "It was the best concert I've been to all year." She chuckled softly, brushing hair from her face. "So, what brings you here? Research? Planning a movie about elementary school band trauma?" He hesitated, then said, Do you believe in long-lost family? The humor in her expression faded. Not in a guarded way, more like recognition passing through a locked room. That's a strange question, she said. But not the wrong one, he replied gently. She looked at him more closely now. You're not just here for the music program. No. Silence bloomed between them. Isabel turned toward her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old photograph. She handed it to him. In it, a toddler sat on a grassy blanket. She smiled at the camera, holding a stuffed rabbit. But the right side of the photo had been torn cleanly away. Keanu looked up. My mother kept this in a box, Isabel said. She told me it was just an accident, a ruined picture. But I always felt like someone was supposed to be there. He took a slow breath. There was. Isabel's voice dropped. Who? Keanu reached into his coat and gently unfolded a second photo. It was the one Lena had held in the break room. The recital shot. Clara and Mr. Leland at the upright piano. Beside it, he placed a carefully transcribed copy of the letter, the one written by a mother who'd been forced to choose the unthinkable. Isabel picked it up with trembling hands. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. Keanu didn't press. He let her hold the silence the way she held her music, carefully, with reverence, with grace. Isabel sat down at the piano bench, the photo and letter still in her lap. She didn't speak for a while. Her fingers hovered over the keys but didn't press them, just rested there, like memory was something she could summon if she waited long enough. I used to dream about another girl, she said softly. Same eyes, same laugh, but I could never see her face. I thought I made her up. Keanu pulled a chair beside her, but said nothing. Isabel looked at him. Is her name really Lena? He nodded. She never knew about you, just felt like someone was always missing. She's real, Isabel whispered. I'm not broken, I'm not imagining it. No, he said, you're remembering. She opened the letter again. Her eyes caught on the name. Clara Isabel Morales. I never liked the name Isabel growing up, she said. It felt like it didn't belong to me. Now I wonder if maybe it belonged to both of us. She held up the torn photo. We were right here, in the same moment. And they split it down the middle. DA didn't split your story, Keanu said gently. Just the pages. Isabel smiled sadly. Do you think she wants to meet me? She's hoping you do. Her throat tightened. She placed the photo back into its envelope and smoothed the edge. Tell her I kept the music going, even when I didn't know why. Keanu stood. She'll want to hear that from you. Isabel rose slowly, still holding the letter like a fragile truth. She looked around her classroom, at the posters, the hand-drawn musical scales, the instruments arranged neatly in rows. This had always been her home. But something deeper was calling now. I've played 1,000 duets, she said, but I think I've been waiting to play one with her. Keanu gave a quiet smile. Then let's give her the other half of the song. Keanu sat in his motel room just after midnight. The air conditioner hummed low in the corner, a soft companion to the quiet spinning of his thoughts. He opened his laptop, the screen casting a cool light across his face, and returned to the same forum where the first thread had begun. This time, he typed a new question. If you could meet someone who vanished from your life, what would you say to them? He hovered for a moment, then pressed post. The response was almost immediate. One came in with just 7 words. I say, I didn't forget you. Another followed. You were the best part of me, even when you were gone. Each reply was different, but somehow, every one of them felt connected, like voices singing in the same key, just in different octaves. Keanu scrolled slowly, reading each one with a kind of reverence. These weren't just strangers typing into the void. They were people carving out space for someone who never stopped living inside them. Another message appeared. I'd ask them if they remembered the dreams. He paused. That one stuck with him. Mikeshig didn't ask for closure. It asked for connection. He bookmarked it. Then, a few minutes later, another message came through. It had no username, no photo, just one line in soft, italicized font. I'd ask if she ever felt me humming in her bones. Keanu knew exactly who it was. Lena. The words read like one of her poems, a quiet ache hidden in melody. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because the emotion behind the words said everything. She wasn't just hoping Isabel remembered. She was hoping Isabel had felt her, somewhere deep, somewhere wordless, in dreams and music, in the quiet hum that lived just below the noise of life. Keanu closed the lid of his laptop slowly and let the moment stretch. He reached for his notebook, the one he'd been using since the diner, and wrote a single sentence. They're riding toward each other now. Across town, Lena sat on her porch with her knees tucked under her chin. Her small lamp flickered beside her. She held her phone in one hand, the screen dimmed but still glowing with that same forum thread. She'd typed her message quickly, almost without thinking, then deleted it, then typed it again. I'd ask if she ever felt me humming in her bones. It was the most honest thing she'd ever written. More than her poems, more than her journal entries. This one didn't try to rhyme or hide. It was the barest version of her hope. Now she watched the post as strangers replied to others in the thread. Some added tears, hearts, broken emoji. Others replied with long stories, memories of friends who vanished, siblings separated by war, parents lost to time. One reply said, I used to feel her in the pauses between every sentence. Another, he left when I was 5, but I still hear him say goodnight. Each comment added weight to Lena's own. She wasn't alone in her wondering. She wasn't the only one trying to speak across silence. She pulled her sweater tighter and stood to go inside. The cold wasn't from the air. It was from years of not knowing how to ask this question out loud. But now, someone had given her permission to ask it, and now she knew. Isabel might be reading too. The next morning, Isabel sat in her car in the school parking lot, staring at the same thread. A friend had forwarded the link to her saying, "Thought of you when I read this." Isabel hadn't planned to reply, but she couldn't stop scrolling. The question on the post echoed too deeply. If you could meet someone who vanished from your life, what would you say to them? At first, she didn't think she had anything to say. But then she read a reply that made her breath catch. I'd ask if she ever felt me humming in her bones. Isabel blinked. Something in her chest responded. Not her mind, her body. Like the words had struck a tuning fork that had always been there, vibrating softly in the background of her life. She didn't know who had written it, but she felt like she did. She placed a hand over her heart. "Don't ice me, I did," she whispered. Even if the words never reached the sender, she knew they had landed. She opened her journal and wrote down the sentence, carefully, word for word. Then, underneath, she added her own. I've been waiting for the rest of the song. Later that day, Keanu stopped by the diner once more. The rain had eased to a mist, and the neon sign above the window buzzed with soft light. Lena was finishing her shift, tying up her apron in the back, when she saw him step inside. She offered a small smile. "Back again?" He nodded. "Couldn't stay away." She poured him a coffee and slid it across the counter. "Let me guess, black, no sugar, still." They sat in comfortable quiet for a moment. Lena glanced at her phone again. The thread had gone viral. Thousands of responses pouring in from around the world. People were pouring out memories, regrets, fragments of childhoods and lost friendships. "Did you see the one about the brother who disappeared when they were kids?" Lena asked softly. "He said he still sets a plate at the table for him on holidays, just in case." Keanu nodded. "People remember." She hesitated, then said, I think she saw my message. I think she did too. Lena looked down at her hands. I almost deleted it. Wait, I was afraid it would feel like too much, like asking something too deep. But it was honest, Keanu said. And sometimes, honesty is the bridge we've been looking for. She glanced out the window. It feels like we've been talking for years without knowing each other's names. He smiled. Maybe you have. She bit her lip. What if she's scared? Then you meet her where she is, Keanu said. Gently. Like music, one note at a time. Lena gave a small nod. Do you think I'll recognize her? You already do, he said. You've been writing to her your whole life. Outside, a mother and child walked past the diner window, hand in hand. The child was humming something under her breath. Soft, tuneless, but full of feeling. Lena listened to the faint sound, then whispered, I think she's been humming too. Keanu looked at her notebook on the counter. It was open to a blank page. Write something, he said. She looked uncertain. What should I write? Write what you want her to read. Lena picked up her pen. She wrote slowly, deliberately, as if choosing each word like it mattered more than the last. If you remember the silence, I'll bring the sound. She underlined it once. Then she turned the page and began writing again. Lena didn't sleep that night. The thread on the forum had become something living, like a river pulling her forward. She read hundreds of comments, most from strangers, but each one echoing a piece of her. Somewhere out there, her sister had seen her words. She was sure of it. At sunrise, Lena opened a drawer beneath her bed and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside were crumpled receipts, yellowed photos, concert ticket stubs, and at the very bottom, her childhood journal. It was small, with a soft blue fabric cover, worn at the edges. She opened it carefully. On the inside flap was a name written in crooked pencil. Leram. She flipped through pages full of jagged little poems, doodles of stars, broken hearts, treble clefs. But over and over again, the same girl appeared. Sometimes drawn in pencil, sometimes just mentioned in passing. She had Lena's eyes. She always had matching eyes. On one page there was a poem, scribbled in uneven lines. She lives in windows / I live in walls. She dances in dreams / I only crawl. But when I see her / I almost breathe, as if her name / is part of me. Lena traced the lines with her finger. She was 9 when she wrote it. A few pages later, the paper had been torn, jagged edges and staples rusted at the corners. Only one word was visible at the bottom of the torn page. Isabel. Her breath caught. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a coincidence. She'd written the name long before she knew it belonged to anyone, long before she believed it could be real. She held the journal to her chest and let her tears come quietly. Not from sadness, from recognition. Later that morning, she met Keanu outside the diner, journal in hand. The morning air was brisk and a layer of fog hugged the parking lot. He saw the way she clutched the journal, like it held something more than paper. She opened to the torn page and handed it to him. She was always in here, Lena said, even when I didn't know who she was. Keanu looked down at the torn word, Isabel. Like it had waited all these years just to be seen. She's ready, he said gently. Lena's voice cracked. Are you sure? She spelt the same things. She has questions. She has the other half. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded note. On it a time. A date. 2 days from now. Back at the diner. No pressure, he said. No stage, just a table, 2 coffees. And space. Lena nodded. She didn't need a script. She already knew what the first page would say. Keanu slipped the folded note back into his pocket and looked at her softly. You don't have to prepare anything. Just bring your truth. Lena looked down at the journal again. I spent my whole life writing to her, but now that she might actually be real, I don't know what to say. I smiled gently. Sometimes silence speaks first. Let her meet you in that. She nodded slowly. Her fingers brushed the edge of the journal, as if to steady herself. The next 2 days moved like fog. At work, Lena floated through her shifts. Customers came and went, orders scribbled and refilled, but none of it landed. Her thoughts stayed tethered to the journal. And the name. Isabel. She reread every poem, every sketch. Her childhood thoughts had always felt imaginary, like the invention of a lonely girl. But now each word read like prophecy. She hadn't imagined her. She had remembered her. That evening she sat at her tiny kitchen table and began writing again. This time, not in the journal, but in a new notebook. She wrote a letter, not to Isabel exactly, but to the part of herself that had waited so long to feel whole. If we were ever side by side, I think the world would have sounded different. I think music would have come easier. I think the ache in my chest would have been a harmony instead of a hum. She paused, then added one last line. Even when I didn't know your name, I loved you anyway. She closed the notebook and exhaled. The next morning, she placed both the journal and the new letter into her bag. Her hand shook as she zipped it closed. Meanwhile, in Portland, Isabel did the same. She stood in her music room at home, surrounded by student compositions and tuning forks, and looked down at her desk. There, she'd laid out a photo, a copy of the letter, and a folded page of staff paper. On it, she'd written a melody. Just a few bars, something simple. She didn't know if Lena played, didn't know if she even remembered how, but the melody wasn't just a gift. It was a question. A way of saying, this is how I speak. Do you recognize the sound? She placed the paper inside an envelope. On the outside, she wrote, for the one who heard the echo. 2 days later, the rain returned. Soft at first, then steady, like the world was clearing its throat before saying something important. Keanu arrived at the diner early. He chose a booth near the back where the windows fogged slightly and the lights above cast a warm amber glow. He ordered 2 coffees and sat with his hands folded on the table. Lena came in 5 minutes later, her hair still damp, her bag clutched tightly under her coat. She gave him a quick, nervous smile before sliding into the booth across from him. You okay? He asked. She nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. She placed her bag on the seat beside her and pulled out the journal, then the letter, then a small folded square of paper with a single line of music she'd tried to replicate from a childhood dream. I don't know what to bring, she said, so I just brought what I could carry. Keanu looked toward the door. Across the lot, another car pulled in. Isabel stepped out slowly. She wore a long coat and carried no umbrella, letting the rain touch her like an old friend. She stood for a moment outside the diner, not moving, just breathing. Inside, Lena's heart pounded. Keanu stood and touched her shoulder. This is the part I can't do for you. Lena nodded, slowly rising. When Isabel walked through the door, the bell chimed, one soft, lonely note. She froze when she saw Lena, the journal, the same eyes. No words passed between them for several seconds. Then Lena said, barely above a whisper, Hi. Isabel's hand tightened around the envelope she carried. Hi, she whispered back. They stood there in the middle of the diner, no script, no preparation. Just 2 lives, split in infancy, drawn back to each other by poems, melodies, and a silence too loud to ignore. Lena gestured to the booth. Want to sit? Isabel nodded and followed her. They sat across from each other, mirroring without trying, their hands resting in the same place on the table, their posture nearly identical. Lena slid the journal forward. Isabel slid the envelope next to it. Keanu stood at a respectful distance, then slipped quietly outside into the rain, leaving them alone. Inside the booth, neither sister opened the journal or the envelope right away. They just looked at each other. Until finally Lena smiled, eyes glassy, voice shaking. I always wondered what my voice would sound like next to yours. Isabel's eyes filled. Let's find out. The morning sky over Portland was low and gray, the kind of overcast that blurred the edges of everything. Keanu waited in the school parking lot, watching the students trickle in through the front doors in their rain jackets and colorful boots. When Isabel finally emerged, her steps were slow. She wore her hair tied back and held a to-go mug with both hands. She didn't smile, but when she saw Keanu, she gave a soft nod, then opened the passenger door without a word and slid in. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Keanu placed a folded paper on the dash between them. It was the napkin poem Lena had written, the one she left behind without realizing. Isabel stared at it, brow furrowed. "She wrote this?" she asked. "Yes," Keanu replied. "I found it in my coat pocket after I left the diner." Isabel picked it up with careful fingers, reading the poem again and again. "I don't remember your name, but I remember your eyes." Her voice trembled. "The handwriting. It matches the envelope from the attic." Keanu nodded. "It is the same girl," Isabel whispered. "The one who lived in my drawings, the one I used to invent stories about. I thought I was crazy." "You weren't," Keanu said softly. She turned to the window and let out a long breath. "It's like my whole childhood was haunted," she said, "haunted by someone just outside the frame. I'd have dreams where someone called my name, but it wasn't my parents' voice. It was a girl's. A girl who sounded just like me." She looked down at her hands. "I started humming songs when I was little, and every now and then I'd feel like I was echoing someone else. Like I wasn't starting the melody, just catching the end of it." Keanu said nothing. He let her sit in the silence she needed. Eventually she looked at him. "She remembers me? She's never stopped," he said, even before she knew why. Isabel nodded slowly. "I want to meet her," she said. "Then we'll go," he said gently. "But I'm terrified." "That's okay. What if she's disappointed? What if I don't feel the way she hopes I will?" Keanu looked at her with that calm steadiness he was known for. "You don't have to feel anything right away," he said. "You just have to be there." Isabel held the napkin again, her fingers gently folding and unfolding it like a fragile memory. Outside the windshield, the mist thickened. She didn't look at Keanu, but her voice grew steadier. "When I was 13, she said. I asked my mom if she thought I had a sister. She said no. She looked so certain when she said it that I believed her." She let the napkin fall to her lap. "But after that day, I started writing letters to no one. I'd seal them and hide them under my mattress. I didn't know who I was writing to. I just knew I needed to speak to someone who wasn't in the room." Keanu listened, his hands resting quietly on the steering wheel. "I told myself it was just an imaginary friend, but it felt different. I used to sign the letters with the name Clara. I didn't know where I'd heard it." She finally turned to him. "That was her name, wasn't it? Clara Isabel Morales?" Keanu nodded. "I didn't make her up," Isabel whispered. "No," he said. "You remembered her." A long pause. She closed her eyes. "I think I've been bracing for this moment my whole life. Wanting it, fearing it." He didn't interrupt. She turned back toward the window. "I've done all this work trying to become whole. Music, teaching, holding space for other kids who felt like they didn't belong. But I never realized I was holding space for myself, too." She gave a soft, tired laugh. "Maybe even for her." Keanu leaned forward, starting the engine, the sound gentle and low. "It's not a long drive," he said. "I know," she replied, "but it goes back a long way." She didn't speak again until they reached the edge of town. The buildings grew smaller. Trees replaced the rows of storefronts. The road narrowed. Then Isabel said, "Do you think she'll look like me?" "I think," Keanu said, "you'll recognize her before you see her." She nodded again. As they approached the outskirts of Lena's town, Isabel opened her purse and pulled out a single photo, the torn one from her childhood. She'd laminated it recently, like it deserved to be protected now. She stared at the empty half beside her baby self. Then she pulled something else from the purse. A new photo. It was Lena's face. Soft, hopeful, worn by life, but not broken by it. She placed the two images side by side on her lap. The gap between them finally made sense. And for the first time in her life, Isabel felt like the picture was whole. The diner came into view just after noon. The clouds were low, hanging like a curtain over the old highway. Keanu slowed the car and pulled into the familiar gravel lot. The neon sign still buzzed softly in the window, and the light inside was warm, almost golden. Isabel stared at the building in silence. "This is it?" she asked. He nodded. "Same place where she left the napkin." She unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't move. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, her thumb brushing the corner of the laminated photo. "I don't know what to say to her." "You don't have to know," Keanu said. "Just listen. Or sit. Let the moment do what it needs." She breathed in slowly and let it go. "You really believe that's enough?" He gave the softest smile. "It's always enough." She reached for the door, then paused again. "Thank you," she said, "for finding me." Keanu's voice was quiet. "I didn't find you. You were already looking. I just cleared the path." She stepped out into the cool air, holding the photo close, and walked toward the door of the diner with steady, careful steps. Lena was already inside, seated in the same booth where it all began. The journal was open in front of her. A fresh cup of coffee sat untouched. She looked out the window, searching, hoping, almost afraid to believe it was real. Then she saw her. Isabel. And in that moment, there was no thunder, no music, no grand declaration. Just recognition. Lena stood. Isabel froze in the doorway. Neither moved at first. Then Isabel stepped forward, slow and unsure, but drawn like a compass back to its true north. She reached the booth and set the photo down next to the journal. Two halves of the same story. "I'm here," Isabel said, her voice barely above a breath. Lena reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the photo. "I never stopped waiting." They didn't hug, not yet. They didn't cry, not yet. But they sat. They breathed the same air. And for the first time since the day they were separated, they were no longer alone in the frame. Outside, Keanu stood beneath the overhang, watching through the fogged glass. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. This moment belonged to them. He turned and walked back toward his car, the rain beginning to fall again. Soft, steady, like memory. And inside the diner, two voices began to speak at once. The rain was steady but soft, a thin veil falling across the diner's windows as night settled in. Streetlights blinked on one by one, casting halos on the wet pavement. The town had gone quiet, save for the occasional car passing through on Highway 6. Lena walked up the diner steps slowly, her fingers curled tightly around the leather strap of her bag. She paused just before reaching the door, catching her reflection in the glass. Older than she felt, but lighter than she remembered. Inside, Isabel was already waiting. She sat at the booth near the window, the same one Lena had served so many strangers in over the years. But this wasn't a stranger. Not anymore. Lena pushed the door open. The bell jingled. Isabel looked up, eyes wide and full, but she didn't speak. Neither did Lena. They didn't have to. Lena walked over, each step measured like a note in a song she hadn't played in years. She slid into the booth across from Isabel and set her journal on the table, gently, almost ceremonially. Isabel reached into her tote and did the same. Two journals, two lifelines laid bare. They opened them slowly, flipping through pages that had lived separate lives, but somehow shared the same blood. Lena's pages were filled with poems, sketches of a girl with matching eyes, half-names and unfinished lullabies. Isabel's had melodies, broken letters, and drawings of twin stars, one always just out of reach. Their eyes scanned the pages together. A line from Lena's notebook. "You don't have to know me to miss me." A line from Isabel's. "I keep writing to someone who never writes back, but I think she hears me." Their hands trembled slightly as they turned the pages. Isabel found one she had written at 15. It was a short entry, no longer than a few lines. "Today I thought I heard someone call my name. Not the name everyone else uses, the name I only hear in dreams." She looked up. Lena nodded. "I used to wake up saying that name," Lena whispered. "Isabel," over and over, and I didn't know why. They both laughed, but it broke halfway into tears. Isabel reached across the table, her hand resting gently over Lena's. "I think I always knew," she said, voice shaking. Lena looked at her with eyes that mirrored her own. "Me too." The booth was silent for a while after that. Neither of them spoke, and neither of them needed to. They just kept reading, page by page, memory by memory. They weren't reading to understand the past, they were reading to recognize themselves in each other. One of Lena's poems caught Isabel's eye. "She walks where I can't follow, / she breathes where I hold my breath, / but sometimes I feel her shadow, / like a second heartbeat in my chest." Isabel touched the page and whispered, "That's how it felt." Lena gave a small, watery smile. "I always hoped someone out there would say that." They both laughed again, soft and breathless, wiping their faces with their sleeves. There was nothing polished about this moment. It wasn't scripted or cinematic. It was raw, honest, human. Keanu sat quietly at the far corner of the diner, sipping coffee from a chipped white mug. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Lena looked at Isabel and asked the question that had lived in her chest since the moment they sat down. "Why do you think it happened? Why were we separated?" Isabel exhaled. "I don't know. The letter said it was a clerical error, that the system made a decision and never corrected it." Lena shook her head. "A mistake that split everything in half. But it didn't break us," Isabel said, reaching again across the table. "We're here." Lena nodded. "We are." They sat with that truth, let it fill the space that had been waiting for it. After a moment, Isabel reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. "I brought something." She opened it carefully and slid out a piece of sheet music, handwritten with soft pencil marks. A melody, no words, just notes that moved gently across the page. "I don't know if you play," Isabel said, "but I wrote this when I was 16. I called it The Echo. I didn't know what I was writing it for. I just knew it felt like someone else was supposed to hear it." Lena traced the notes with her fingers. "I used to play keyboard. I haven't in years." Isabel smiled. "Maybe that's okay. Maybe you weren't meant to play it then. Maybe you're meant to now." Lena folded the sheet slowly, with care. "I'll learn it," she said. "You already know it," Isabel replied. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, 2 journals remained open. 2 mugs grew cold. And 2 sisters began, at last, to feel whole again. Lena turned one last page in her journal and stopped. There, drawn faintly in colored pencil, was a picture of 2 girls standing in front of a swing set. One was clearly Lena, same long braids, same wide eyes. But the second girl had always been a mystery to her. Until now. She held it up and smiled. "I drew this when I was 7. I didn't even realize I'd kept it." Isabel leaned closer. "I used to dream about this swing set. I thought it was made up." Keanu blinked. It was real. In the backyard of one of the foster homes. "I used to sit there and talk to you. I guess I just didn't know your name." Isabel nodded, lips trembling. "But you knew my face." They both laughed again. Not the kind of laugh that bursts out from joy, but the kind that tumbles gently through grief and relief, like breath after holding it too long. Across the diner, Keanu stood. He left a few bills on the counter and headed for the door. As he reached it, he glanced back once, just long enough to see the two of them leaning over their journals, foreheads almost touching, the space between them finally filled. He stepped out into the quiet evening. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were parting in soft, wide strokes. Back inside, Lena finally asked, "Do you think it's too late for us to be close?" Isabel looked her in the eye and shook her head. "We already are." They sat like that for a long time, sharing more pages, more poems, more soft stories and secrets never spoken aloud. Then, without even thinking, they both reached for their pens. They didn't ask what to write. They just began, side by side, matching hands, matching hearts. One journal, now, two names at the top of the page. The sky had cleared by morning. A gentle fog still hovered over the hills, but the kind that felt more like a hush than a weight. At a quiet cafe 2 towns over, Keanu sat by the window, his phone resting on the table beside a half-drunk cup of coffee. He stared at the screen for a moment before opening his notes app. He typed one line. "What's the one thing you'd tell someone who was taken from you too soon?" He stared at it, thumb hovering above the post button. Then, without fanfare, he shared it. The post went out into the world, no name, no explanation, just a question dropped gently into the stream of voices searching for someone else. Replies began to appear within minutes. One said, "I would tell him I still wear the sweater he left behind, even though it doesn't smell like him anymore." Another, "I'd tell her I still listen to the voicemail she left. I never deleted it. I never will." Keanu read each one, letting the words settle like dust. A comment came in from someone named Jules. "We didn't grow up together, but we still grew toward each other." He paused on that one. There was something in it that mirrored what he'd just witnessed at the diner. Lena and Isabel hadn't been raised side by side. They hadn't shared birthday parties, matching shoes, or whispered secrets at night. But somehow their lives had bent in the same direction, toward music, toward memory, toward the sense that something sacred had been misplaced, but not lost. Another reply came in. "I kept you in every word I wrote." It was short, simple, but it echoed Lena's journal. Page after page had carried Isabel's shadow, even when she had no name to give it. And then another. "I found you in music." Keanu thought of Isabel's quiet melody, the one she had written at 16 without knowing why. Of how she gave it to Lena with the hope that somewhere inside her, the sound was already familiar. He bookmarked the 3 replies. There was no explanation, no response, just a soft, silent acknowledgement that some things don't need to be said aloud to be understood. The screen dimmed, but he didn't close the phone yet. He sat with the weight of the words. Not heavy, not sorrowful, just true. Keanu slid his phone back into his pocket and looked out the window. The sidewalk outside was slick with dew, catching soft light as the sun began to burn through the mist. The world felt quieter today, like it was listening. In a nearby town, Lena woke early. She couldn't sleep much the night before, not from worry, but from a strange sense of peace she wasn't used to. It filled the spaces where anxiety usually lived, a sense that something lost had finally been named. She made coffee in her tiny kitchen and sat at her table, flipping through the journal she and Isabel had shared the night before. Some pages were hers, some were Isabel's, some were both. Lena smiled as she turned to the back, where Isabel had taped the melody she'd written. The Echo. The title was now circled, and beneath it, Lena had written new lyrics in her own hand. She began humming softly, not to remember, but to continue. She thought about what she'd say if she ever posted a reply to one of those anonymous questions, the ones that somehow always knew what was stirring inside her. She imagined typing. I would tell her, I don't blame her. Not for the silence, not for the time, not for any of it. Because I always knew she was out there, trying to find her way to me. And maybe she would, but not today. Across the state, Isabel stood in the music room at school. The first bell hadn't rung yet. She liked arriving before the students, before the noise, before the day asked too much of her. On her desk was a fresh stack of composition paper. On the whiteboard, she'd written a single sentence in blue marker. Even the notes we don't play shape the song. She read it again and nodded. She pulled her phone from her bag and opened the same social media app she'd scrolled through countless times. This time, the question caught her eye immediately. What's the one thing you'd tell someone who was taken from you too soon? Her thumb hovered over the reply field. She typed, "You were never really gone. You just lived in a place my memory couldn't reach." Yet, she stared at the words, then hit send. Somewhere in the algorithm, her reply joined thousands of others. And somewhere, in a bookmarked folder, Keanu would later find it. He would smile when he read it, because he knew exactly who wrote it, and who it was for. That evening, Keanu returned to the diner. He didn't go inside. He simply parked across the street, windows down, listening to the soft hum of the town settling down for the night. Through the big front window, he could see Lena and Isabel inside. The place had closed early. A single lamp hung above their table, casting an amber glow over them as they bent over notebooks again. They weren't writing alone anymore. They were building something, side by side, sister by sister. Keanu opened his phone one last time. The replies to his question had multiplied. One said, "You were the part of me that never stopped whispering, even when I forgot how to listen." Another, "I used to believe you were just a dream, but I know now that love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." He paused on one that made him close his eyes for a moment. "We were separated by paper, by people, by silence, but not by soul." He saved it quietly. No fanfare, just a quiet tap of the heart icon. Behind him, a breeze moved through the car window. Somewhere inside the diner, laughter spilled out faintly. The kind of laughter that comes after tears, not in spite of them, but because of them. He watched as Isabel reached into her bag and pulled out something rectangular and wrapped in ribbon. A gift. She slid it across the table. Lena opened it slowly, revealing a bound blank journal with a single sentence written on the inside cover. "For the chapters we still get to write." They locked eyes. And this time, the hug came. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't posed. But it was long, honest, full of all the things they never got to say when they were too young, too far apart, too incomplete. Keanu smiled, not because it was finished, but because it was beginning. The post he had shared earlier would eventually fade. People would scroll past. New questions would rise. But somewhere between two journals, two melodies, and two matching sets of eyes, something sacred had been returned to its rightful place. Not through time, not through chance, but through quiet persistence. The kind that leaves no headlines, only homecomings. The diner was quiet again. It was late afternoon, and the golden light poured in through the tall front windows, bathing the booths in a soft, honeyed glow. The storm from the day before was gone now, and the sky outside had opened up wide and blue, like a canvas ready for something new. Lena sat at the booth where so much of her life had changed. She sipped slowly from a mug of tea, the steam curling around her face like breath on a cold morning. Across from her, Isabel opened her purse. "I brought something," she said, reaching inside. She pulled out a small envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was the photo, the one she'd held on to since childhood. It was old, slightly curled at the edges, worn thin from being touched too often. In the image, Isabel sat on a blanket in a backyard, barely 2 years old. Her smile was wide, her eyes bright. But on the right side of the photo, there was a missing shape. Someone had been cut out, torn away. "This is the one I told you about," she said. "I always knew there was supposed to be someone else in it." Lena leaned forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her own bag. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, a crumpled drawing from years ago. She smoothed it on the table. The drawing showed two girls. They were stick figures, but detailed in the way a child can be. Both had the same eyes, the same braids. One had the name Lena written underneath. The other had no name. "I used to draw her all the time," Lena said. "This one was from when I was maybe 5. Isabel placed the photo and the drawing side by side on the table. They stared at the two images. Two different forms of memory. One from ink, one from film. But the resemblance was undeniable. Lena and Isabel looked at each other, and for a moment, neither spoke. It was all there. In their faces, their eyes, the curve of their cheeks, the tilt of their chins. They didn't need a DNA test. They didn't need paperwork. They didn't even need the letter anymore. They were looking into a mirror that had taken 25 years to find its other side. Lena smiled first. "You were always there," she whispered. Isabel nodded, eyes wet. "So were you." Just then, the door creaked open and Keanu stepped inside, a soft breeze following behind him. He saw them at the booth, heads bent together over the artifacts of their lost years. They looked up, smiled at him, and Lena called out softly, "Would you take a picture for us?" Keanu walked over slowly, a gentle smile on his face. He looked at the two sisters sitting side by side in the booth. The same booth where Lena had once scribbled her poems in solitude. The same spot where Isabel had first seen her face reflected back through tears and memory. But today, there was no sorrow in their posture, just peace. Isabel reached into her phone and handed it to him. "Would you mind?" He took it without a word and stepped back. Lena and Isabel adjusted slightly in their seats. Their journals were open in front of them, with the childhood photo and the crumpled drawing placed gently between. Neither of them tried to pose. They just looked at each other and smiled. Keanu took one photo, then another. In the second one, Isabel reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Lena's ear. Lena laughed softly, her shoulders lifting in that instinctive way people do when they feel seen. He glanced at the photos. Perfect. He handed the phone back and Isabel looked down at the screen. She blinked hard. "That's the picture I always wanted," she said. Lena nodded, then looked at Isabel's journal, still open on the table. "May I?" Isabel slid it toward her. Lena took the photo and gently taped it to the inside front cover. Then she opened her own journal, the same one she'd scribbled in since she was a girl, and did the same. Now, both books began with the same image, the same light, the same faces. Isabel traced her finger beneath the photo. "For a long time, I wondered what I'd say if I ever found you." Lena smiled. "And now that you have, I think I just want to keep writing," Isabel said. "Together." They sat in quiet agreement. Keanu returned to the booth without asking and slid into the seat across from them. He didn't say much, just looked at the journals, the drawings, the photo. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin, the one with the poem Lena had written on the night he first came in. He placed it on the table. Lena gasped softly. "You kept it?" "I keep things that matter," Keanu said. Isabel looked between the napkin and the journals. "We should put that in here too." Lena smiled. "In the center, where the story really started." They moved gently, with care. The napkin was placed on the middle spread of the journal, between past and future, between the forgotten and the found. Keanu glanced out the window, watching the last of the sun stretch across the parking lot. They stayed there long after the tea had cooled and the light dimmed behind the windows. For the first time in their lives, Lena and Isabel weren't writing to someone out of reach. They were writing beside each other. Isabel flipped to a fresh page in her journal and slid it to Lena. "Let's start something new." Lena picked up her pen and thought for a moment. Then she wrote the first line. "We were ridden apart, but meant to rhyme. Isabel added, 2 voices, 1 page. Finally heard. They both leaned back, looking down at the page. There were no tears now, just quiet understanding. That deep kind of knowing that only comes when you've survived the ache of being incomplete and found your missing piece. Keanu stood and placed a few bills under his cup. Lena looked up at him. "Will we see you again?" He smiled, gentle and knowing. "I think you already saw what you needed to." Isabel tilted her head. "Then what should we do with the rest?" He nodded toward the journals. "Tell it, in your own words." They both nodded. He turned to go, and just before stepping out into the early evening air, he paused and looked back. "Oh, I think Mr. Leland would have loved your melody, Isabel." She blinked. "How did you—" But the door had already closed behind him, the bell giving one soft chime. Lena and Isabel turned back to the journals. Their photo smiled up at them from the front page, side by side, together. The caption, written in Lena's careful handwriting, read, "The photo with 2 faces, finally whole." The diner was nearly empty. The sun had dipped low, casting soft streaks of amber across the linoleum floor. The hanging lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the only sound was the quiet scribbling of pens across paper. Lena and Isabel had filled several pages between them now, some with words, others with doodles. Their laughter still lingered in the corners, faint but lasting, like music that played long after the last note. Isabel looked up and smiled. "It feels different now, doesn't it?" Lena nodded, "like the air's clearer." They closed their journals at the same time, instinctively in rhythm. The photo of them sat quietly at the center of the table, warm in its newness. Neither wanted to move, but both knew they had to go eventually. Lena glanced under the table, her hand brushing the wooden underside. It was smooth but old, marked with decades of stories and conversations, whispered truths and first kisses, tears spilled over late-night coffee. So many lives had passed through this booth. She looked at Isabel. "Let's leave something." Isabel tilted her head. "Like what?" "A note," Lena said, "for the next person who sits here, wondering if they're alone." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded slip of paper and a pen. She wrote, slowly, with care, "If you feel like someone's missing, you're not wrong. Keep writing." She might be looking too. She slid the paper across to Isabel. "What do you think?" Isabel read it once, then pressed her hand gently over Lena's. "It's perfect." Together, they folded the note in half, then again, until it was no bigger than a matchbook. Lena bent low, tapped a piece of tape from her journal pouch, and fixed the note to the underside of the table, just beside a crack in the wood where the varnish had long worn away. It looked like it had always been there, hidden, waiting. They sat back in silence for a moment, the note tucked away like a secret meant only for those who needed it most. Lena whispered, "Do you think anyone will find it?" Isabel smiled, "If they're supposed to." A few minutes later, they gathered their things, journals zipped closed, phones stowed, pens pocketed. Isabel opened the door, holding it for her sister. Lena glanced back one last time at the booth, at the empty cups, the soft lighting, the still air. Then they stepped out into the quiet night. The next morning, the diner opened just after 6. Doris arrived first, as she always did. The keys jangled in her hand as she unlocked the door, the familiar creak of the hinges greeting her like an old friend. The lights flickered on one by one. She moved behind the counter with practiced ease, flipping the switch on the coffee machine and setting out the pie case. It was a quiet kind of morning, the kind Doris preferred. She walked past the booth near the window, where she'd seen Lena and Isabel talking just hours before. Something about them had stayed with her. The softness in their voices. The way their laughter didn't sound new, it sounded like it had returned after a long time away. She reached under the booth to sweep a few stray crumbs with her small handheld broom when her knuckles brushed paper. Doris paused, thinking fast. She reached further, fingers finding the edge of something smooth. A folded slip of paper taped carefully beneath the table. Curious, she peeled it loose and opened it. Her eyes scanned the words. If you feel like someone's missing, you're not wrong. Keep writing. She might be looking too. She stood frozen, the note trembling slightly in her hands. And then, slowly, a smile began to spread across her face. It wasn't the kind of smile meant for show. It was the kind that bloomed slowly from the inside, rising up from a deep well of memory. Her throat tightened as tears began to form in her eyes. Unexpected, but not unwelcome. Doris sat down at the booth. She placed the note on the table in front of her and folded her hands. A wave of something old washed over her. She wasn't sure what it was at first. Maybe it was the memory of that night long ago, when a young woman had left behind an envelope and a prayer. Or maybe it was the faces of the two girls, now women, who had walked into the diner strangers and left something like sisters. She didn't know the full story, but she didn't need to. She knew enough. Doris wiped the corner of her eyes with the hem of her apron and sat still for a few more minutes, as if honoring something sacred that had happened in that spot. Something you couldn't scrub off with soap or sweep away with a broom. Eventually, she stood and tucked the note into the pocket over her heart. She would keep it, maybe even read it again tomorrow. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Customers trickled in. Truckers, teachers, early risers needing their first cup of coffee. Doris moved among them with her usual calm, taking orders, refilling mugs, sharing soft smiles. But every so often, her hand would drift to the pocket where the note rested, as if to make sure it hadn't disappeared. She didn't tell anyone about it. Not yet. Some things were meant to stay private for a while. To sit quietly in your heart and warm it from the inside out. Later that afternoon, when the rush had passed and the lull of the day returned, Doris sat at the counter with a fresh pot of coffee and her old journal. She hadn't written in it for years, but today, something stirred. She flipped to a blank page. Then, slowly, she copied down the message she'd found. If you feel like someone's missing, you're not wrong. Keep writing. She might be looking too. She stared at it for a long time, then added her own words beneath. Sometimes, the right words find the right hands, even after all this time. She closed the book gently, as if not to disturb the moment. Across town, Lena sat by her window, journaling again. This time, there was music playing. Soft instrumental piano drifting from her phone. The kind of music that fills the spaces between memories. She looked up and smiled as her phone buzzed. A message from Isabel, just a photo. It was a shot of a whiteboard in a classroom, with her students' scribbles all around the edges. In the center, Isabel had written, "Write like someone you love is listening." Lena typed back one line. Because he is. The thread between them, once invisible, now pulsed, steady and strong. Two women, two notebooks, one story that had waited decades to be read aloud. Back at the diner, Doris tucked the original note into a small glass jar behind the counter, not for decoration, but for safekeeping. One day, she thought, someone else would come in. Someone carrying questions too heavy for their own hands. And maybe, just maybe, they'd sit in that same booth, feel the echo of something once lost, now found, and look under the table and find hope, folded in ink and time, waiting to be passed on. It was a Tuesday morning in Portland, and the sky was painted with soft gray clouds, heavy but gentle. In the small music classroom tucked behind the elementary school, Isabel stood at the front, tuning her old upright piano. The keys had seen better years, but the tone was warm and familiar. She ran her fingers over them slowly, letting the sound fill the room like a whisper waking up the walls. Her students, still settling in, watched curiously. She smiled and tapped lightly on the middle C. I want to teach you something different today. Not from a book, not from a composer, just from memory." A few heads tilted. Isabel didn't need sheet music for this. She closed her eyes for a moment and the melody came effortlessly. Simple, soft, a lullaby that had lived in her since she was a child. It never had words. It had just always been there, like something remembered from a dream. She began to play. The notes rose and fell in gentle waves, not loud enough to demand attention, but too lovely to ignore. The children leaned in, their chatter fading to silence. Some began to sway, a few closed their eyes. One girl near the back hummed along instinctively, as if she'd heard it somewhere too. When Isabel finished, her fingers lingered on the keys. One student raised a hand. "Did you make that up?" Isabel paused. "No," she said softly. I think I remembered it." The class clapped, small hands slapping desks and tables. Isabel smiled, but her chest felt full in a way she couldn't name. Not heavy, not sad, just full. Across town, the same tune drifted through the late afternoon air. Lena walked slowly down a quiet sidewalk, her journal tucked under her arm, earbuds out so she could hear the world. But she wasn't listening to traffic or wind or birds. She was humming. The melody came without thought, like it always did. It was a tune she'd hummed since she was small, sometimes while waiting for her foster parents to come home, sometimes while lying in bed staring at the ceiling, sometimes just to feel less alone. She didn't know where it had come from. It had never needed a beginning. That day, she walked all the way home humming that same soft tune, slow and steady. She didn't even notice the man on the corner who turned his head as she passed, recognizing the sound. He didn't speak, just smiled gently and went on his way. Back inside her apartment, Lena set down her bag and grabbed her phone. She didn't hesitate. She called Isabel. Isabel answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said, her voice warm but laced with something unspoken. Lena didn't waste time. "This might sound strange," she began, "but there's a melody I've had in my head since I was little. I don't know where it came from." There was a pause on the line, a breath. Then Isabel said, "Me too." They sat in the quiet of the call, letting the silence speak before the words followed. "Can you hum it for me?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Isabel didn't respond with words. She hummed. Soft, clear, familiar. On the other end, Lena's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes welled instantly. "That's it," she choked. "That's exactly it." Isabel let out a shaky laugh. "You're kidding me." Lena began humming too, layering her voice beneath her sister's through the phone, like harmony rising after years apart. They moved together, note for note, as if they'd rehearsed it 100 times. No words, just music. Just the sound that had lived in both of them, quiet and waiting. "I used to hum that in the dark," Lena said, her voice breaking. "When I didn't think anyone could hear me." Isabel's voice cracked in response. "I think I did, somehow." They were both crying now, but they didn't stop humming. The melody became a thread between them, one not bound by blood or proof but by sound, a sound that had survived paper trails, foster homes, and decades of silence. Later that week, they met again in Isabel's school music room. The walls were lined with colorful drawings from children. Instruments leaned against stands waiting for hands. At the front, the same upright piano stood ready. Isabel sat on the bench and scooted to one side. Lena joined her, her fingers already twitching, nervous and eager. They didn't need to discuss it. They just began. 4 hands, 1 melody. They played it through once, then again, this time with variation. One carried the bass, the other the high line. Isabel added a soft hum. Lena echoed it. The final note lingered, hanging in the air longer than it should have, like it didn't want to leave. Lena wiped a tear from her cheek. What do we call it? Isabel thought for a moment, then whispered, Echo. Lena nodded. Because it lived in both of us. They recorded it on Isabel's phone. No edits, no effects. Just two sisters, one piano, and a lullaby that had waited its whole life to be heard fully. That night, after the recording was saved and their journals were tucked away again, Isabel sent the audio file to Keanu. No message, no explanation, just the file. He was already on the road by then, somewhere between towns, the sky wide and dark above him. He parked by a quiet stretch of highway, rolled down the windows, and sat still as the music played through the car's old stereo. The melody poured softly into the night. It is gentle, full of ache and peace all at once. The kind of tune that didn't demand attention. It asked for presence. It made you stop, made you feel. He listened once, then again, and on the third time through, he closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw two little girls on opposite sides of the same night, humming the same lullaby without knowing why. He saw their paths diverge, twist, and nearly vanish, until something quiet pulled them home, not through force, but through rhythm, through the invisible lines music can draw between souls. When the song ended, he sat for a long time in silence. Then he whispered to no one, still here. Somewhere back in Portland, Isabel was already working with her students to arrange a classroom version of Echo. And across town, Lena was writing lyrics to go with it. They didn't rhyme, they didn't follow any rules, but they felt true. She wrote the final line with slow, steady strokes. She was the sound I carried before I had words. She tucked the page into the front of her journal, right beside the photo of the two of them in the diner. Later that weekend, they uploaded the song online. No fanfare, just the title and the description, a lullaby remembered by two hearts that were never really apart. Within hours, comments began to appear. Some said the song made them cry. Others said it reminded them of someone they'd lost or were still waiting to find. One simply read, "This feels like coming home." Isabel screenshot that one and sent it to Lena. Lena sent back a heart. Keanu, miles away, read the comments too, but he didn't reply to any of them. He just bookmarked the page, closed his laptop, and looked up at the night sky. The stars above him shimmered without sound, but in his mind, the melody lingered. Not just in his memory, but in the quiet between his thoughts, where the best songs always live. It started with a question Lena wrote late one night in her journal. What if the letter we needed most was never written because no one thought we were listening? She read the line to Isabel over coffee the next morning. Isabel set her cup down and stared at her sister. "That's it," she said. "That's the whole idea." Within a week, they launched the first draft of a small online project. They called it One Last Page. The idea was simple: invite kids in the foster system, or anyone who'd ever felt abandoned, forgotten, or silenced, to write one last page to someone they'd lost. It didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be long, just honest things. Letters, poems, drawings, scribbles, even recordings. Lena and Isabel would take turns reading them aloud in short, weekly videos. They recorded the first video in the music room after hours. A single lamp cast soft light over the piano and the desk where Lena sat. Isabel stood behind the camera. The room was quiet except for the gentle whir of the heater and the hum of her voice. Lena read the first letter slowly. It was from a 13-year-old boy in Spokane who had written to a sister he barely remembered. His words were rough, misspelled, but filled with so much heart. "I don't know your name, but I remember your laugh. It was loud like mine. If you're out there, I hope you got something better. I hope you got music. I hope you didn't forget me." When she finished, Lena sat in silence for a moment before folding the page. Then she looked into the camera. "Sometimes," she said, "the page you never wrote is the one that saves you." They uploaded the video that night. No ads, no flashy intro, just words and feeling. Within 2 days, their inbox was full. Letters from foster kids, letters from adults who had aged out of the system, letters from people who had never been in foster care but knew the pain of losing someone too soon or too quietly. One girl sent a drawing of her mother in a blue dress with a caption that read, "I don't know if you were real, but I still love you." Another boy sent a poem titled, "Half of Me," where every line ended with the words, "Come home." Isabel read that one aloud in their second video. Her voice cracked halfway through, but she kept going. When they finished, she whispered, "These kids, they're writing what we never got to say." Lena nodded, and someone's finally listening. They didn't have a studio. They didn't need one. Each video was filmed in quiet places that felt safe. Sometimes in the music room, sometimes in Lena's small apartment, once even in the booth at the diner, long after closing. Doris would leave the light on for them and set out tea before slipping into the back, giving them space. Keanu never appeared on camera, but he was always there. He helped behind the scenes, quietly adjusting microphones, checking lighting, editing the final footage. When the first video passed 1,000 views, he said nothing. Just handed Isabel a small, polished plaque with the words, "Palm last page," for the letters that were never sent. She kept it in her classroom window, where the morning sun would strike it just right. The submissions kept coming. One boy wrote a song for his brother who'd been adopted separately. Another girl recorded a voice memo, whispering a message to a mother she'd never met, saying, "I just wanted you to know I still draw stars on every birthday cake, just in case you're watching." Lena and Isabel took turns reading each one, treating every letter like it was sacred. They didn't comment, didn't add their thoughts. They just let the words breathe. One episode featured a drawing from a child only 6 years old, a crayon picture of 2 stick figures holding hands, labeled "Me and Her." No names, no story, just a caption written in large blocky letters. "I miss you every day." That week's video didn't include a reading, just the drawing on screen, with soft piano playing in the background. It went viral. People shared it across platforms, tagging friends and loved ones, writing their own one-line notes in the comments. Some wrote to siblings, some to parents, some to people who had vanished from their lives without goodbye. "I don't know where you are," one comment read, "but I still set a plate for you every Christmas." Another simply said, "I kept the sweater." The effect was quiet, but massive. Teachers reached out asking if they could share the project with students. Counselors requested permission to use the videos in therapy sessions. A small nonprofit offered to help fund future episodes. But Lena and Isabel turned down all offers that included sponsorship or branding. They wanted it to stay personal. "We didn't make this to be a platform," Lena said to Keanu. "We made it to be a mirror." He nodded. "Then let it stay clear." So they did. Week after week, they continued to post. Sometimes just one letter, sometimes 2, always ending with the same line. "No one ever told you. Your words mattered." They still do. One afternoon, after filming their 8th episode, Lena and Isabel sat together on the floor of Isabel's apartment, surrounded by opened envelopes and folded drawings. The soft light from the window cast long shadows across the room, and between them lay a quiet stillness. Exhaustion, maybe, but the good kind, the kind that follows something meaningful. Isabel held up a small letter, barely bigger than a postcard. "This one's from a 12-year-old girl in Nebraska," she said. She wrote, "I think I have a sister. I hope she hums like me." Lena closed her eyes, the words settling over her like a blanket. They didn't speak for a while, just sat, listening to the hum of traffic outside and the occasional flutter of papers shifting in the breeze. Then Lena said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't left that napkin?" Isabel smiled, her eyes distant. "I think about it all the time. I think the melody would have found me eventually, It just needed time. Later that evening, they recorded their next video at the diner. Doris had lit a candle on the table for them, just beneath the framed photo of the two sisters seated in the same booth weeks earlier. Keanu sat in the corner again, sipping coffee. He watched without interrupting, his face calm but alert, as if absorbing every second. Lena sat forward and looked directly into the camera. We called this project One Last Page because sometimes that's all you get. One more chance, one more sentence, one more sound. She glanced at Isabel, who reached out and took her hand. And sometimes, Isabel continued, you don't even know what you need to say until it's too late. But it's never too late to try. Lena smiled, eyes shimmering. To anyone watching, if you're carrying words inside you, if you think no one would care what they sound like, write them anyway. You never know who's waiting to read them. The video faded to black, with only one line left on screen. Sometimes the page you never wrote is the one that saves you. That night, as the video uploaded, Keanu stepped out into the drizzle and zipped up his jacket. He paused by the diner's front window, watching the sisters inside, laughing now, relaxed. Something about it made him feel still, whole. He didn't stay long. He didn't need to. But as he walked away down the sidewalk, a single sheet of paper remained taped to the diner's door. Keep writing. Someone's reading. Sometimes, the missing pieces of our lives aren't gone. They're just waiting. Folded in paper, scribbled in margins, held in memory, until someone helps us read them again. The pieces might come in the form of a napkin, left behind by accident but filled with truth, or in an old photo missing half the frame, a half-sung lullaby that traveled through two different hearts, waiting to be sung in harmony. Lena and Isabel didn't start their lives together, but the threads that tied them never unraveled. They only grew quieter, softer, hidden in the white noise of growing up, until someone came along and helped them hear it again, not with noise, but with listening. It's easy to believe that what's lost stays that way, that the people we never met or the moments we missed don't belong to us anymore. But sometimes, a part of us keeps humming, keeps dreaming, keeps remembering someone we can't explain. Maybe it's not about proof. Maybe it's not even about finding what was lost. Maybe it's about recognizing the echo when it returns. For Lena, the silence of her childhood wasn't empty. It was waiting for a voice, a name, a melody. For Isabel, her sense of something missing wasn't wrong. It was memory in disguise, waiting for the page to be turned. What changed everything wasn't a single discovery or letter or photograph. It was the choice to believe there was something worth uncovering. It was the courage to write one more sentence, even if it seemed small, to play one more note, even if the harmony felt far away. That courage, quiet, steady, often invisible, is what brought them home. And for Keanu, who never made this story about himself, it was always about that courage in others. He didn't solve the mystery. He didn't fix what was broken. He simply paid attention. He read the napkin. He noticed the silence. He listened. And sometimes that's all it takes. Now, as Lena and Isabel continue to share one last page with the world, it's no longer just their voices echoing through empty space. It's hundreds of voices, thousands, all folded into pages, sealed in memory, reopened one letter at a time. And still, the question remains. Who do you feel connected to, even if you've never met? Maybe it's someone you dreamed about when you were small. Maybe it's a name you can't forget, even if you were only told it once. Or a laugh you still hear in a crowded room, even when no one else reacts. That connection, it doesn't need logic, it doesn't need permission. It only needs your memory to say, yes, I still feel you. Sometimes we don't write letters because we're afraid no one will read them. But what if someone's been waiting to? What if the words you've never said could be the very thing someone else has needed to hear? That's why One Last Page exists, not just for reunion, but for reflection, for expression, for love that never had a voice. If you're still holding something in, something unsent, unfinished, unheard, write it down. Say it aloud. Send it to someone who will understand. And if you don't have that someone yet, keep writing, keep singing, because she might be looking too. If you could meet someone who vanished from your life, what would you say to them? Or better yet, who do you feel connected to even if you've never met? Leave your answer in the comments below. You never know who might be reading. You never know whose echo you are. And if this story moved you, if you believe in second chances and the power of quiet courage, share this with someone who still carries a silence of their own. We'll be back next week with another incredible story. This one begins with an elderly woman, a forgotten camera roll, and a photo that brings back a soldier's final promise. Until then, hold on to your pages. They matter more than you know.